Hello, Penn State fans. It's the final Wednesday of June, and that means it's time for another edition of BWI Live. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Commitment season is upon us. The recruiting dead period started back on Monday. It lasts for 2 months leading up to the start of the 2025 college football season, but as I'm sure you heard on Tuesday's BWI Live, just because the coaches can't go on the road and just because the recruits can't come to campus, that does not mean there's nothing else going on in recruiting. It's commitment time for a lot of prospects, T. Frank. One coming at some point today that Penn State is a finalist for, and it's going to be a busy rest of the week on that front as well.
Yeah, there's always something going on with Penn State recruiting, except for the dead period, except for they've got to make their announcements and decisions. And so you wrote about this morning. Of course, we've been tracking this over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Pierce Petersohn decided to make his announcement today at some point. We don't know when. This one pretty up in the air, but it was a great time to. There have been a couple of announcements. So just to start the show, here are your news and notes sort of section. Damari Simeon, if you missed it, he's going to be announcing Friday at 5 p.m. Appreciate him put a time on that. That's always nice. Jackson Ford on Friday, and then a couple just out in the middle distance. Marlon Bright has had a July 5th date that I think for a while he's had that date, and then Dorian Barney also has July 5th on his calendar. So the day after the 4th of July holiday, Penn State could get some extra fireworks. We'll find out then. But the big ones this week obviously are Petersohn, Simeon, and Ford. Penn State has a shot to land all three of them, and we'll be finding out with you in a lot of these situations how this is all playing out for Penn State.
Yeah, so since Pierce Peterson's going to decide today, we'll talk about him briefly. 4-star athlete out of Minnesota. On3 currently ranks him as a linebacker. Penn State likes him as a tight end. The tea leaf suggests that perhaps, among other factors, of course, one of them being whether he's going to stay in state and go to Minnesota, his other finalist, or go out of state and come to Penn State, could just be what side of the ball he wants to play on in college. The Golden Gophers seem to like him on defense. Penn State likes him on offense in the vein of the Tyler Warren route, going from high school quarterback to tight end. Pretty good sales pitch for Penn State, of course, a good angle to sell. And as we talk at 10 a.m. on June 25th, no predictions logged on the On3 recruiting prediction machine just yet. So he's had a quiet recruitment, T. Frank. I was going through his social media on this morning. And he's a three-sport athlete, so there's a lot of exploits out there. I mean, if you go check out our story at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, he's a tremendous track athlete, he is a tremendous basketball player, and he is a tremendous football player, which is why he is so sought after. Because I think the two teams that he's down to, Minnesota and Penn State, but also the ones that also offered him during this process, I believe one of the other visits he took was to Iowa State. I'm sure there were a bunch of other teams in the mix as well at one point. But he is fascinating for college football staffs because you can just look at him, and if you're watching on YouTube with us right now or on replay, you can see his highlights. You can just imagine getting to get Chuck Losey's hands on him, or a strength coach at another school getting to develop him, and the possibilities seem endless, T. Frank, for what he could do at the next level for either one of his finalists, Penn State or Minnesota, who he will pick between at some point today.
Yeah, and I just find it fascinating thinking of him as a linebacker because being 6'5", there are not a lot of 6'5" linebackers. Minnesota seems to like those big linebackers, though, guys that are, I want to say abnormally large most of the time to have proper leverage and the ability to break down in space and move laterally. It's hard if you're not in that 6 foot, maybe the 6 foot's on the shorter side, but 6'1" to 6'3", somewhere in that area. Once you get to those other tall players, you also naturally become 250 pounds and move to defensive end. So I think Penn State is smart to see him as a tight end. It fits all the things they've done and proven. It would be, I don't know Pierce Petersohn. I don't know him as what are his motivating factors, but if you're choosing between the two programs, Penn State offers the obvious path. We've seen this multiple times with a former high school quarterback going on and becoming a great athlete and becoming a great tight end prospect or first-round draft pick from the Nittany Lions. So it feels like a strong place that Penn State's in, and another one of those evaluations that they've done where it's not a name that we started out having a conversation about, but they might find themselves a steal in this class in Pierce Petersohn if he follows that same mold that they've gotten from other guys in previous classes.
There's no doubt about that, T. Frank. Yeah, good morning to everyone in the chat. If you have a question for us, feel free to leave it, and we will see if we can get to it in our mailbag section. If you're listening on replay, good afternoon, good evening to you. Leave us a comment there, too. Whether you're on YouTube or on one of the podcast feeds, we would love to use that on a future show, and, of course, potentially answer it over on the Lions Den message board as well. T. Frank, I'm going to put the schedule back up here and put you on the spot.
Okay.
But of the 5 guys that we have on this list, Pierce Petersohn deciding today, Damari Simeon on Friday, Jackson Ford on Friday, and then Marlon Bright and Dorian Barney on July 5. Look, Penn State could end up with anywhere from 0 to all 5 of these guys. Is there one that stands out to you, though, as in a way that if you had to pick to lock in a commitment today from one of those 5, one of them stand out above the rest to you for one reason or another?
Damari Simeon. The position and the talent. I think he's uniquely talented in terms of his movement skills. He fits Penn State's profile of what they're looking for from a defensive tackle unbelievably well. He's explosive. He moves the way that if you look at the guys that they've recruited, Zane Durant, Xavier Gilliam, Isaac Chikora, these are guys that are hyper athletic defensive tackles. They're a little bit on the smaller side, but they have certain characteristics that make them really good athletes at the position, former defensive ends that moved inside. Damari Simeon is that, but he plays defensive tackle. And he's explosive. He's got the right length metrics. He has elite earmarkers in terms of what he could become at the next level. The recruiting ranking reflects that, but it's also the fit. And I think, to me, that's also part of the conversation when you're talking about fit and perception. Now, that's just if you said just one, I think Damari Simeon is also to help out people like Lambda here in the chat, who says if they're not in the bargain bin, we're highly unlikely to get them. I think there's a psyche win there for Penn State fans that I think is important, and we're going to get into that here in just a second, talking about the rest of the show. But I think that's part of it. Now, if we're talking about who Penn State needs to get, I think on that list, I can't go farther than Jackson Ford. In-state prospect, defensive end, stop the bleeding. That's kind of the feeling there. If they were to get 2 of those guys, I think that does a good bit of rebound from last week. Doesn't fix the holes, that created by those other players. Right. But I think that's kind of the way I see where the class is right now and what they need from both, all the different layers that all go together, right? Like it's not just about the talent, it's all about perception and kind of momentum, all those things that I kind of roll my eyes at because there's no way to gauge them. But I think it's obvious right now the momentum is not with Penn State. And so it would be good for them to get a big win in Damari Simeon first and foremost. But I also think that Jackson Ford has a unique, you got to get one of these Philly area guys to agree to join you in the class of 2026.
Well, whatever happens today and throughout the rest of the next week, and there will probably be other commitments that pop up along the way. Join us for the latest news, information, and intel on Penn State recruiting at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It's $1 for the first week and then build annually from there. Penn State, of course, looking to get back on the right track in the recruiting realm as summer workouts continue for the guys already on campus. So we'll be talking about that and a whole lot more over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where it's $1 for the first week of access and then build annually from there. T. Frank, one guy that gave Penn State fans good news quite some time ago at this point and has continued to provide nothing but good news is the highest rated prospect in the class of 2026 from a commitment perspective, Harrisburg native Kevin Brown. He was the offensive tackle MVP at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge on Tuesday out in Indianapolis, making a case for 5-star status eventually in the class of 2026. He was on threes number 7, top performer at that event yesterday. And, again, he just, every time he does really anything, but certainly events like these, T. Frank, he just seems to shine.
Yeah, and it's funny that he's at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge and he's not a 5-star and he gets the MVP status, but these are the metrics and the math of like how all of this works out. We've covered on multiple occasions on multiple shows why that's a good idea and why that's actually the right way to go about these things. He's not the number 1 offensive tackle in this particular class. Some of the physical limitations, and I put that in air quotes for people listening, and I did this is terrible, by the way. You look older than doing finger quotes on, I look like Dr. Evil at this point. But the point being, like, there are reasons we do these things, but he's not a 5-star, and the physical limitations he might have of not having 35-inch arms and not being 6'6", those are all valid things to consider. But when the production and the talent of his physical ability, his movement skills are all obvious, then you kind of have to go, well, all those things are, James Franklin likes to say, there are different tools, right, that you can have. And you can see him here doing 25 reps on the bench press at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge. Steve Wiltfong of On3 got this video here for us. When you have a certain number of tools, those are all weapons for you to use. He might not have every single tool, but he has more than enough to be considered a top talent in this class and a guy that should be a 5-star eventually. So, we can get into all the things of not playing last year with a broken foot. You're going to see just the strength he has at 275 is incredible. So yeah, just there's every single time he shows up, he's ticking another box for why he should be considered one of the top prospects in this particular class.
Yeah, and you make a good point that I think a lot of people often forget about, which was the injury that cost him time on the field last season. And if that wasn't the case, is he higher in the rankings? Maybe, maybe not. You never know. But certainly would have had a better case for it. But he made his case at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge this week, and we'll see where and if he moves heading into the season. And then, of course, he'll have a big senior season, he hopes, to move up even further. Yeah. So good day for him out there. It's interesting to me because he doesn't do a lot of interviews, kind of quiet, unassuming, just goes about his business. Perfect offensive line recruit. I think we forget sometimes how good he is and where he's rated in this Penn State class of 2026.
He also got better. I think at the start of last year, there maybe wasn't the power we see now. I don't think he necessarily had at the beginning of last year. He's physically matured this offseason. So some of those things, maybe if you were concerned he's 260, maybe he is too lean or whatever, he's filled out. Like, having seen him in person, you can see the strength and bench press. We can argue about whether or not bench press is well correlated to football performance. Yeah. Lifting it 25 times is hard, no matter what you say. So I think, proving in a lot of these situations that he is that strong. He's had, the highlight lifting videos. I think he squatted 405 this offseason. So the strength metrics are all coming along exactly on schedule, by the way. It wasn't too early. It's not too late. It's right when you want it to be. He's peaking heading into his senior year, and he'll continue to ascend, peaking as a high school player, and he'll continue to ascend after that. It would be shocking if there was something that stood in his way in that aspect.
Well, again, stay tuned to BlueWhaleIllustrated.com for the latest on Kevin Brown and all of Penn State's recruiting efforts in the class of 2026. Kevin Brown, of course, is not the only member of this Penn State class that is rated number 12 in the On3 industry team rankings as we sit here on June 25th. And the topic of the show today, if you saw the title of the episode, is the hidden gems in this class. Players who are either, in the mind of T. Frank, underrated or could be underrated, at this point in time and moving forward. So let's roll right into that, T. Frank. Let me find my sheet here.
Can I just set this up? I just want to set this up. So I was thinking about, first off, Kevin Brown was the jumping off point of, here's a guy that's been committed for, I think, over a year at this point, and or close to a year at this point, and is really good. And the last week, it is totally understandable. You just look through the chat, Greg, and there's a lot of unhappiness.
Yeah, you would think this is the recruiting show. Yeah,
there's a lot of unhappiness about where Penn State is. There's, I put Lambda's comment up on the show earlier. Have you ever watched kids play video games, like a racing game? The first time anyone ever picks up a controller, and it's like, hold on. It's like when they're driving and they're like this, and then they're like this, and they don't understand how driving works. Because really, when you drive, you're making just slow, slight calculations and changes to the wheel. We have been
Don't tell that to the people who drive up 322 to Penn State football games on Saturdays. I'm not sure that's as well known as you think. Don't let that secret out of the bag.
Well, no, we should. We should let that secret. It should be a requirement when you pass your driver's test. But my point is, like, we have been on the show, and I think generally correctly steering towards the negative side of things and assessing what happened and the debrief after the loss. But we don't want to run into the ditch. And that's kind of where I want to make sure that this show, from the perception and from the fact of what we do, is that we're discussing the positives and the negatives, but we're not diving into the ditch. And so after a week of Thursday, Tuesday, the negativity on the show, and I don't mean that as a detriment, as the reality, we do need to just steer a little bit closer to the middle of the road. And that's why I wanted to do this. Like Kevin Brown set off this idea of like, here are the Penn State did not get Joey O'Brien, but they do have players that are very good at football. And they do have players that I think in this class, it feels kind of like last year. There's a certain segment that is uniquely underrated, both guys that are obviously underrated and guys that have the talent to outplay their rankings. So that's what I wanted to get to today. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, because I think that that's kind of a responsible thing to do today. Plus, it was interesting to talk about, and we needed something here on the Wednesday show.
Yes, June 25th is June 25th across the content creation landmark. Yeah, go ahead and explain that, because I know what it is, but not our viewing audience on YouTube.
So for the podcast audience, I just happen to have a controller here beside me because, I only use this for business. I only use this area for business and for the show. Wink, obviously. So Mech Engineer says, T Frank plays video games. I'm 34. Of course I play video games. I was raised on video games. I understand, like, if you're from an older demographic, you might say, like, oh, video games. Like, everyone Greg and my age play. Greg, you play video games, right? Like, you and your friends play video games. Yeah, okay. All right.
Yes.
Anyway,
that's it. That's it on that. It's also a show tool, if I'm not mistaken, or at least it was at one point.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when you see all those graphics popping up, they got to pop up somewhere. So, all right. At any rate, on to the underrated discussion here in the Penn State class of 2026. Where do you want to start your list here?
Yeah, let's just start with the obviously underrated guys. The players that we have seen either in person in camp or on film that are not in an area where they're going to end up. So Jasir Rogers is the name that everybody is aware of. These guys are clearly underrated. I think Jasir Rogers is a top 150 at minimum sort of receiver. Maybe can even outplay that eventually in terms of his long-term projection of talent and not just physical talent, but ability to play on the field. And this is this group here. These are the guys that have exhibited both physical talent and the play, whether in camp settings or on film, that they have a composite that they're going to move up. Like, in my opinion, they're absolutely going to move up. These will be 4 stars. The guys that are not consensus industry ranking 4 stars now, but they will be. So Ben Azuka, Isaac Chikwara, and Amari Polidor, along with Jasir Rogers. Those are the 4 guys I think that make up the core of the obviously underrated players. I don't think any player has done as big of a 180 in my mind from when I first started watching him to how I feel about him now as Ben Azuka. This is a guy that I think is going to be. Not only is he a guy that can play at Penn State, which was an open question in my mind watching him before, where some of that overweight issue was causing his film to not look the way you would want it or make it look like a Penn State prospect. But now I think there's a path to him playing early in his career. And I don't necessarily mean as a true freshman. Penn State doesn't usually, even Cooper Cousins didn't start as a true freshman, but he's a guy who's positionally very good. He's exhibited really strong fundamentals, and he's been coming to camp getting better this offseason. I think all of that leads to a guy who's going to be not only a 4-star, but a guy that contributes at Penn State in whatever form or fashion early takes for him. I think he's mature enough to do that, and you just see enough. There's a certain number of things you just see enough. Isaac Chikwara, I think, is a 4-star defensive tackle. I totally understand why he's not right now, because he's undersized. I think he's about 6 feet tall. When you see him in person, you don't go, oh, that's a high 4-star defensive tackle. But I always talk about length. Length and hands are the way you win on the line of scrimmage. And Chikwara has the profile of a guy that can be a plus pass rusher, which is really hard to do on the college level as a defensive tackle. I think he's got that stuff. And so to me, like, whether or not he ends up as a 4-star, this is a guy that I see as a guy that's going to be a player at Penn State and is going to provide something potentially unique. So a big get for Penn State in this class. And then the one that I think is the fastest rising recently is Amari Polidor, where the film didn't provide a whole lot. The level of competition didn't provide a whole lot. But when you see him in person, you see the way he moves. You see he's just never stressed. I watched him go up against even Penn State commits Davion Brown this past weekend. and speed, change of direction, nothing really stressed him. I would love to see him play Jasir Rogers to see like where the limit of that is. But he's a guy that plays zone man. I don't have a problem. His ball skills are very good. I think as a corner, conversation about Dorian Barney and Kari Adams, I still think they should want one of those guys. I still think more is better at that position with more options. But Amari Polidor, I think, can be that all-around guy in the class that they don't have right now with Jaziel Hart and Julian Peterson, who are kind of two sides of the same thing when it comes to good production, good talent, but maybe neither has proven both at this point just yet. So those are the four guys that are obviously underrated prospects that will move up, according to T. Frank, who has no power to change on any of those things. I shouldn't say that out loud because people seem to think that that's true, and you should always present that you have way more power and influence than you actually have. But, I have honesty problems, unfortunately.
I'll ask you a question, maybe just for me, maybe for somebody else out there wondering. But when you look at this group, at least with a couple of them, you've mentioned the fact they come to camp, they do the extra work, and you've been covering these camps for a long time. What does that mean for some of these guys when they're able to get that many reps? Not everyone can do it. Not everyone wants to do it. But for the ones that do it, what have you seen over the years that lead to, or that extra experience? What does that player gain from that in your mind?
You're getting coaching from the coaches that are going to be coaching you at Penn State in real terms. And I know I said coaching a whole lot, but that's what it is. It's about getting the world-class coaching that we talk about at Penn State from all of these guys are respected at their positions as developers of talent. Penn State's a developmental program, so it's not every single day, obviously, like camp in spring, summer, and fall, but it is an exposure to the fundamentals that you can then take with you and practice the correct things on your own later. So guys, and there's real world examples, especially on the offensive line, which is such a technical position. To understand the basics and the fundamentals, if you can master those, then you can go on to the harder technical things of how to use your hands, how to understand stunts, how to understand run angles, and all those things that you need to know as a football player from a mental perspective, because you're not thinking about, I need to take a 6-inch step. I need to make sure that my pad level is low. I need to make sure that I have the right posture when I'm in a pass stance, and I need to make sure I have the right strike angle so I'm not throwing my hands wide and I'm not coming over top. I'm shooting out directly into my target. All those body mechanic things that you can work on and understand how to do those things, and you get that coaching from these coaches. These are invaluable if you take them and apply them. A guy that is the obvious example here, not just Cooper Cousins, but Anthony Donko was a really raw prospect who came to camp a lot and transformed himself in the first year and a half of doing these camps and then on campus into a guy that became a very good football player and shortened the curve to being able to start for Penn State.
All right, T. Frank, let's move on to the players that could be underrated, which you want to set that part of it up and then dive into your list?
Yeah, so these are guys that don't have the film or maybe some specific things that are, it's not a complete, in my opinion, from what I've seen. And, for some of these guys, there's a little bit of incomplete because there's not a lot of, maybe they don't have enough film, or I haven't gotten to all of it just yet on some of these guys, but they don't have the production to back up their physical abilities, or there are parts and areas that are maybe a little bit missing. So these are guys that just they can prove and they can fill in the gaps and holes, but from an athletic perspective, they are obviously not a 3-star. And so they have to kind of work their way into that conversation. I'm just less certain that these guys will do it their senior year to afford the ranking increase that they might get.
Real quick, Stephen Light. Yeah, it's cold in this basement. That just is what it is. I'm not even sure it's an AC thing. It's just the way the house is set up. So, yeah, that's a fair point. I was waiting for someone to bring that up. Certainly, it is not hoodie weather anywhere but this particular basement. So, anyway, we'll get back on a Heat tangent maybe a little bit later in the mailbag segment. But players that could be underrated, T. Frank, I'm going to pop your list up here on the screen. Number of guys here, some of which have been committed to Penn State for quite some time. And in one specific example, the most recent commitment. So go ahead.
Yeah, we'll start with Elijah Littlejohn. I'm still working on him in terms of what he is as a football player. Took me forever to find his highlight film because the listed school that he was at is not where he played last year. So I went on a wild goose chase. Shout out to Ryan Snyder for being a big J journalist and getting some information for us. But athletically, like the feedback has been that he is a guy that is above. He's a 4-star consensus player, but might even be more than that. I just don't know in what way yet. Some of the guys here I want to just run down. Julian Peterson is a height, weight, speed player as a corner. And I think if you're talking about a guy that can outplay his ranking and kind of fill in the missing pieces from not getting Kari Adams, or if they don't get Dorian Barney, Julian Peterson has the athletic profile to be that guy in the long term. And then Penn State saw these things coming in the class of 2026. They got 20 commits before they got to this, so they didn't end up with no prospects that fit the profile of what they're looking for. Did they take some guys early and bank on their in development? Yes, but I think that's a smart call, so you're not left at the end with nothing. If you're saying that the success is only the top two at all of your positions, you are even Ohio State and USC, and they're not all going to get all of their top prospects. There's just no possible way you could do that. So I think Julian Peterson's really important in this particular conversation, going back to the Amari Polidor, Julian Peterson. One of those guys does have to step up into that role. Roseby Lubintis is the other tackle in this class. He needs to work on a couple of things, from his positional ability to I think he's got to lose some weight and be more athletic. But he is, if we're saying like somebody is Anthony Donko here and is going to go from guard to tackle and be very good at it, Lubintis has the size, the length, and that hidden athleticism where the weight is kind of getting in the way, but he's clearly got quick enough feet. He's just got a lot of work to do on some of those different areas. And he's been one coming to Penn State and working on those with Phil Trautwein. So there's another encouraging kind of upward trajectory. I just, for athletically, that's what you're looking for. He is, in a lot of ways, he's Emmanuel Iheanacho. They even hedged there of, here's a guy who's 350 some pounds at 6'5", all the length in the world. They found a guy with those measurables, maybe doesn't have that profile as a 5-star recruit. So they've been baking in some of these things throughout the class. LeVar Keys, elite athlete. I think his tape is really good. It's the size to me. I think I just need a little bit more evidence he's going to prove he can play bigger than 5'10", 165, 170. But the two guys, the one guy that I think will do that is Daryl Carey. 6'2", really good at athletic safety. He looked really good at camp. I thought he improved in areas that I identified on his film from last year that I thought he needed to improve. And then the guy that I've been kind of back and forth on is Alex Haskell. He's a great athlete. He moves really well for a defensive tackle. I think seeing him in person, he's gotten bigger. And strength to me was the area I wanted to see him improve, where you can move and be great as a pass rusher. But if you're a defensive tackle, there has to be a certain level of brute force you apply to guards in high school to kind of prove that you are a 4-star prospect. And I think that's something he's been working on. I think he can get there, but it is something that I don't feel comfortable putting him directly into that. I feel like it's a slam dunk that he's among the 4 guys that are obviously underrated. But of that group, I know Fitz is very high on him. I think he's the closest in that group to being, in my obviously underrated. So I don't want to be too biased towards my opinion. I think he maybe and Daryl Carey are the two that could leap into that most easily this year.
Right. Well, the fun part is we'll get to learn a lot more about where these guys can move during the season, which is going to be here before we know it. So is the Penn State football season. Going to be a very poor transition here, but I'm going to do it anyway. So Stephen Light, talking about offensive linemen in the chat, says, man, Penn State really stacking up nice offensive line players. Such a huge difference over the last decade. So here's my pitch. Blue White Illustrated season preview magazine is coming out in mid-July. If you go over to my Twitter feed, it's at Greg Pickle. There's a link there for free shipping and 50% off the purchase price if you pre-order the 116-page edition by July 14th. The reason I bring that up and how it pertains to Steven's comment is that I was doing a feature on the offensive line for the magazine yesterday and going back through some of where Penn State was at the start of the James Franklin era, where it was at the midway point, where it is now. And it's really difficult to put into words how far that position group has come. Even in the last few years, I think is probably an underrated talking point. But obviously, everyone realizes where Penn State was at that position in 2014 compared to now. But that's my magazine plug and also a way to answer a chat question. So a 2-for-1 there. But yeah, offensive line, recruiting, step forward, and obviously play step forward as well. So certainly look forward to everyone checking out the magazine. And like I said, it's over on my Twitter feed if you're interested. T. Frank, any other thoughts on this underrated recruiting conversation?
It's a trend for Penn State football. I think this is where they are best. So this is as much as I think if they were able to nab some of these 5 stars like the chat is talking about, their ability to develop players would amplify and kind of force multiply all of this. Because here's a great example. Chaz Coleman was a 4-star player. I don't remember specifically if he was a high 4-star, but he's a 4-star player. I don't think he got a lot of attention as much as he should, where Ohio State and Penn State are battling late to get this guy. So when we talk about Carter Meadows and Luke Wafel, you absolutely want to stack talent. You don't want to miss on these guys. But let's not be blind to the fact that Penn State is really good at talent evaluation. So again, one of the things that sticks with you, the things that just kind of stick in your brain. Somebody said that Penn State is going to be Iowa if they don't get these top guys. They're still identifying talent at a high level. There's a reason that when Penn State offers somebody, 15 other schools are right behind them to try and offer and get in the door early, because Penn State does an exceptional job at identifying guys. Ben Azuka is a great example of this, of somebody who came from really far off the radar and is now like to me, a major cog in this class. So again, like, don't go too far off the road into the ditch with the negativity. It feels good, right? It validates that pain you felt. But I think the best thing we can all do is be aware of our tendencies as people, right? To overreact one way or the other and try to keep ourselves more in that middle area of, okay, we'll see what they can do. We'll see what this class can do. And the sky is not falling and made of fire.
That is 100% a good way of putting it, T. Frank. Penn State fans, there's good news on the way. Just stick with us here and at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for the latest.
Yeah, and I'll throw this to you, Greg, because this is the opposite end of the spectrum of get whoever you want and be the Ohio State or the USC or whoever. That's Penn State wrestling. So we've been talking a little bit between ourselves, texting back and forth about this with Bo Bassett. We're not going to have a wrestling show this week, but we got to talk about it, right? So what's going on with Bo Bassett and how is Penn State? Where is Penn State in this particular recruitment process for one of the best wrestlers in the upcoming class?
Yeah, so we didn't want to do a whole show on this because it really comes down to a lot of, according to Flo, Penn State, Nebraska, and Oklahoma State are his 3 finalists. Now, if you're not familiar with the wrestling world, Bo Bassett, very well-known class of 2026, high school recruit, number 2 in the country, was committed to Iowa for about 5 months and change, decommitted recently on Sunday night, actually, and now is trying to figure out where he will go next. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because his camp has gone pretty quiet, it seems like, since the decommitment announcement. But Penn State back in the running for him. The Lions have 2 class of 2026 commits already, including his teammate at the Johnstown Bishop McCourt, Sam Herring. So we'll see if Bo Bassett ends up at Penn State, if he ends up at Nebraska, Oklahoma State, or somewhere else. Not sure when a decision is coming, which is, again, why we didn't want to do a whole show on this, because there's a lot of unknowns in his recruitment now after the decommitment, which ended a first part of his recruitment that was very public. So if you listen to any of our Penn State wrestling shows previously, dating probably back to around the holidays and early in 2025, he was releasing a list of top schools like once or twice a week. It was very public, very open. He was sharing info about visits and coach conversations, things like that. Since the decommitment, it's gone pretty quiet. You wouldn't think it would take him a whole lot of time to figure out where he wants to go, T. Frank. He made the visits. He had the coach contact periods, things like that. So, you would think it will not take a ton of time for him to figure it out. But as we talk at 10:35 on June 25th, Eastern time in the morning, no decision for him yet, but stay tuned. So that's our wrestling update for I believe, probably, T. Frank, the first time on the BWI Live Wednesday show.
Yeah, probably.
And then it comes in June is about all you need to say about the way the news cycle works in college athletics anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that there's a time for creative content, right? Which is what I call buy or sell, which is the idea that maybe there's not news, but there's stuff to talk about. We can have the grab a beer and have a conversation about football sort of thing. By the way, just an aside here, because we got a couple of minutes before we get to buy or sell. I was having a conversation with my nephew, and I always forget this. Like, I don't get to catch up with him a whole lot. He's in college. He listens to the show. But Greg, he said, like, yeah, I don't always catch the Wednesday show. And I was just like, what? You don't catch the Wednesday show? Like, what?
I would not want to listen to me for an hour either, so I get it.
What? Listen to the Wednesday show. I don't know what else to say. Like, I love this show. I enjoy having the conversations we do with you. So, like, yeah.
And
anyway,
with you, my
that was
friend.
it.
Yes. And thank you, everyone here with us, again, either live or on replay. Yeah, there was a basketball commitment yesterday, international pickup for Mike Rhodes' men's hoops team. I don't know much more about it than that. I wish I could provide you with more information, but I just don't have much to work with there, other than, obviously, Penn State Hoops gets a needed roster addition ahead of the 2025-2026 season. The NBA draft is tonight, so we'll see how that plays out. And go from there. We'll have an update on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I unfortunately don't have much more to say there. I read one NBA mock draft over the course of the last 6 months, so
Are you
unfortunately, I mean, I have a hat, but other than that, no, not really.
Okay.
Hard team to root for, man. Hard team to root for. Just very frustrating. The Flyers are very frustrating. Winter's pretty brutal once the Eagles are done. So
yeah.
And then you watch the Phillies, and that gets a little frustrating too. But at any rate, we are way off the rails here. So let's get back and switch June 25th. Yeah. I think we're allowed to do that every now and again. But
oh no, Greg has a personality.
Only on Wednesdays. All right.
Yeah.
Let's get into buy or sell. Again, if you've been watching the last couple of weeks, as we've been counting down the days to the return of Penn State football, the topic and the premise here is pretty simple. You're either buying and agreeing with the topic presented, or you're going to sell and disagree with whatever question we ask. And we invite you to play along with us in the chat. First one up today, T. Frank. Buy or sell. Penn State will have a surprise starter that is not due to injury. So here's how I set this up for T. Frank when I was talking to him off air before the show. So I think we can all agree that Cooper Cousins very likely looks like the next starting guard at Penn State. Dejon Lane looks like the starting safety beside Zachary Wheatley for Penn State. Zariah Fisher looks like he's going to be the starter opposite Denai Dennis Sutton at this year for Penn State. So at defensive end. So that's kind of my idea here. There's some spots, obviously, wide receiver being one of them, where everything's up for grabs. You could even maybe throw Khalil Dinkins at tight end into this conversation, where, again, it looks pretty clear-cut what's going to happen without having a James Franklin issued, non-issued, whatever, depth chart, or whatever they do these days with the game notes in front of us. But buy or sell, a surprise starter will be on the field for Penn State when it opens the season against Nevada on August 30th.
I like this question. This is my favorite question we're doing today, and that's why I want to call this the question of the day. So, Penn State is a surprise starter. I'm going to go sell. I'm going to sell this one because I don't know. The problem is, like, I wouldn't be surprised by some of the other names involved at the positions where there is a question. I don't know who's going to be the Mike linebacker. I guess I would be surprised if it's Amari Campbell. I think Dom DeLuca's got that spot. He's got a lead on that spot because he was here for spring camp and all those things. The only other spot to me, and I know I've been like obsessed about it over the last couple of months, is the nickel position. But to be a surprise there, it'd have to be Kenny Wosley or Colin Dinkins. Like I think it's a 50-50 sort of situation, or there's a strong leader in Zion Tracy and King Mack are the two guys that I've identified personally. I would be surprised if it's redshirt freshman or a run on in Colin Dinkins. No other position presents like any place that I would say is a surprise. That's my problem. I don't know, like Keon Wiley being a starter would be a surprise, but I don't know how that would happen. I think he can be a contributor. I think he could play. I think he might even be worthy of starting reps, but at what position? How would that work out? I don't see that if, at that linebacker position with the guys that we expect to be the starters, I don't see anyone jumping them. That would be the surprise to me, I guess, if I was going to identify one. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, and again, the key part of this question is not due to injury. So obviously, like you go back to the opener last season, and if we would have been having this conversation at this time last year, I think you maybe could have made the argument that Luke Reynolds could work his way into a starting spot, but Luke Reynolds would not have started that game if not for Khalil Dinkins being hurt. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the qualifier here that you have to keep in mind. And I've gone back and forth on it. I'm going to buy. I think
All
somebody will surprisingly shoot up the depth chart. It's boring if I sell and we both have the same opinion, so I'm going to talk myself into this. I think somebody will find a way to shoot themselves up the depth chart. Now, look, it could very easily come out like I could feel great when the first snaps are taken on August 30th, and then afterwards James Franklin comes in and says, so and so just wasn't available today. So then that would ruin my good feeling. But
ruin the good feeling.
Yeah. So. I don't know. I'm just taking
Andrew
the shot here.
Rapplier?
Like
I think maybe Rapplier is a good
like
player.
tight end is one that like they could start two tight ends. Okay, well then who is it? Is it Rapplier? Is it Reynolds? Is it somebody else? I'll just throw Andrew Olish out there to get people wound up. Why not? We haven't talked receivers yet. We got to do something. But then the other spot that I think like would it shock you? Would it shock you if somebody found a way to? I guess it would. The more I talk, the more. But, like, what if Alonzo Ford wasn't fully ready to go yet and they started somebody else? Like, or what if he was maybe not as back up to speed as, like, maybe defensive tackle? And it wouldn't be for the whole season. Again, Simeon asking the chat to define it. It's for the opening game. We're not talking full season. So I'm going to buy something. And the other, I think you mentioned it, but yeah, that nickel spot's interesting too. So we'll see. Linebacker, I guess a possibility as well, though. If it's anyone but Rojas and DeLuca, I'd be surprised. So yeah, I'm going to go buy. It's a lukewarm buy, but I think there's enough possibilities that exist for me to go buy here.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I think that's it's also fun. Like as you mentioned, it's just fun to like have surprises. So I'm even rooting for it now that I think about it.
All right, next up on our buy or sell list, T. Frank. Buy or sell. Penn State produces 2 first-round picks in the 2026 NFL Draft.
So it's not a lock, but if Drew Aller was already a borderline first-round draft pick last year and he's getting as much buzz as he is right now, I'm going to say that as far as locks can go, he's one of them. So that means there needs to be another. Guys who have the talent, Nick Singleton, A.J. Harris, Tony Rojas. And I say Tony Rojas from a physical perspective. He would have to have an elite season, be everything that I've said he could be a multi-interception, multi-sack, multi-tackle, kind of guy. Tackles for loss, just lead in so many different categories. Physically, he's got the ability to be a 230-pound modern NFL linebacker. That's the size, the dimensions everybody's looking for. So I'm going to go buy. I'm going to buy this. And I'm going to say that Nick Singleton turns into a first-round draft pick. Running back, he's got the talent, and I think Stan Drayton can do a lot of good. They've got the offensive line for him to get the perception bonus and be put in the best possible situation. And that makes me feel good. I also think A.J. Harris has the talent. So I'm going to go buy. I'm not going to say all 3, but 2 for sure. I'm going to go with 2.
I like you taking a stand on this. This is either going to be really good audio and video to play back in about 10 months, or it is not. I love it, though. Take a stand, man. I love it. I debated this when I saw you had it on the rundown because I'm with you. I think that right now, as things stand, you have 3 guys who are in the current media mock drafts. Obviously, Aller's 1. A.J. Harris is 2. Then Dennis Sutton's 3. Could somebody else play their way into that? Sure. And yeah, Nick obviously has been in a few of them, not as many as those guys, but it's been a little hit or miss across the board outside of Aller. You're not sure who you're going to find, and they're so early anyway that it really doesn't matter.
Can I give a sleeper?
Yeah.
This is stupid, and I'm just saying this for dramatic effect, but Venga Ioane.
That's totally fair.
330 pounds. It's hard to. So this is the problem. It's hard to be a guard and be a first-round draft pick. Again, he has to have like a mind-blowing season. Then he has to test really well. But at 330, like again, this is how much I was impressed by the way he looks And what I've thought for a while he needed to do, this is also confirmation bias of I always thought he needed to drop a little weight and be more athletic. I think he's going to be more athletic. I think that strength that he has is now explosive, violent strength. Look out. He's one guy that I got an eye on for that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna buy. I'm not gonna take a stand like you did. I'm not as fun, but I will buy. And I think if you look at what Penn State, on paper at least, should be able to accomplish this year, generally speaking, that leads to at least multiple first-round draft picks, if not a handful. So yeah, I think that Penn State, a number of Penn State players, including Aller, will play themselves into a spot in the first 32. Whether it's 2, 3, 4, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But certainly the options abound, and there's probably some guys that could shoot up draft boards, in potentially as well. Round 2, there will be a few. Yeah, there's no doubt. This will be unlike again. This past year's draft was a little. I don't want to say. Yeah, I guess it's fair to say boring, for Penn State fans, but that's because of how many guys came back, and it will make next year the opposite. So, yeah, I think there's no doubt that. Penn State, with the number of high-quality players it returned, will end up with good day 1 and also day 2 results, and day 3 even, in all likelihood, in 2025.
It should be a big class. I mean, that's why they came back. Eric says Aller and denied Dennis Sutton. I think denied Dennis Sutton, from everything I've seen in terms of like off-season workout videos, like he's putting himself in position to be all of that. And edge rusher, if he has a good season. He had a good season before. He's had the profile of production has been there the whole time. So I think that's also a good shout. Denied Dennis Sutton could be sneaking to the first round.
All right, we're on the same page there. Let's see about our final buy or sell topic, which is, will this be the final season for Penn State offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki with the Nittany Lions? Obviously, we heard Kotelnicki's name batted around for potential head coach opportunities last year, before he elected to stay with the Nittany Lions. I think, his announcement came the day after the Big Ten title game. So quick to put all of that to bed. Maybe not so much this year. Buy or sell, T. Frank. This is the last season for Andy Kotelnicki at Penn State. Okay,
so I'm going to ask you a question here, and then I will give you my answer. Does Penn State beat Oregon or Ohio State? And do they make... Okay, then yes. He becomes a head coach somewhere else, because here are the things an offense coordinator needs to do: produce in big games and produce quarterbacks. If he can guide Drew Aller to being a first-round draft pick, I just said I think Drew Aller is going to be a first-round draft pick. Resume builder, beating a big team, helping Penn State get over the hump. The perception is already there. The media attention is already there. Once he puts these things together, then I think that, and it's a good thing, generally a good thing for Penn State to then be able to go get the next Andy Kotelnicki, because they've produced guys that are going on to other places, and it's a desirable destination. So yes, I think it's a positive thing that this is Andy Kotelnicki's last year as Penn State's offensive coordinator, because he's going to be in such high demand for what he accomplished this year. So I'm going to go buy.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts on this. The first one is, it's never been harder to be a college head coach, and Andy Kotelnicki has kind of talked a little bit about his career aspirations. Seems like he's interested in one day being a head coach. So I tepidly buy here with the reality of, I think the assistant coach trade is going to be, and especially the coordinator trade, is going to be a lot more appealing to a lot of people after the first cycle of the rev share era and the House settlement. So that's kind of, again, I don't know anything more. I'm not saying that Andy Kotelnicki has anything to do with that conversation, just in general. I think that's interesting. So yeah, I'm going to buy here. His name has been linked to jobs previously. He is listed on, all the stories that come out about coordinators who could be a head coach next. He's on all those lists. That's not for no good, it's not for nothing. So I don't think there's any doubt that he, if he wants to, will have the opportunity to leave Penn State. But here's the other thing. Again, this gets screwy with the calendar. How do you do it? Obviously we saw it with Jim Knowles moving to a coordinator position, but how do you do it going from coordinator to head coach with the way the calendar is, depending on how long you play?
That's a great point.
It makes it hard. It makes it really hard. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, I mean, I think all the tea leaves point to buy, but if Penn State plays till the middle of January, and the transfer portal and things like that, are schools willing to wait around?
And there's really no way you can accept the job and still stay at your current location, because recruiting is so important, and because the timeline, as you mentioned, just the timeline, the overlap of important things, you can't like accept a job and then be trying to work that thing and also going for a national championship. If Penn State's in that position, then that's why Andy Kolnicki's getting like that's why he's getting that attention. So you really just put a big old hole in my buy argument there with that thought. I don't know. Like now I'm regretting it. Now I'm like, I don't know if all the tea leaves line up, and like basically I'm painting an optimistic picture here because hey, it's June, why not? Then yeah, that maybe that makes it impossible for him to be a head coach somewhere in 2026. So I don't know. We'll find out, I guess.
Just depends where you go, man, right? Like if you're not going to be hunting the top echelon of transfer talent, you can have a little bit more wiggle room, I think, than if you're going somewhere a little bit more high profile. But that's a conversation for another day. I think we're both from, I guess the better answer to this question is from a, could he do it? Would he maybe want to do it? Would it be the time to do it? I buy. Could the mechanisms of the calendar make it a sell situation? Yes, there's no question about it. So I think we're on the same page there. All right, we have just a couple minutes here. If anyone has any final questions, I want to get T. Frank's final thoughts on this Wednesday edition of the BWI Live Show. I can't believe it's already July. I can't believe commitment season is here, but both are. So don't forget, it's $1 for 1 week of access and then billed annually from there to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. T. Frank, any final thoughts on your mind on this final Wednesday of June?
John says, T. Frank, I'm really considering hiring you as my personal therapist. I assume you're less expensive than my current shrink. Yeah, I do a terrible job. I do a terrible job in my own household. So like I have these thoughts and opinions. Who knows if anyone follows them? But that's, that made me laugh a little bit. Yeah, I appreciate you buying into the positivity. Hopefully more people live with a little more positivity the next couple of weeks. And, you just kind of get into that mindset because here's the options. You can live in a negative headspace and then you're in a negative headspace, or you can live in a positive headspace and more opportunities are available for you in life. And that's just generally, I think, a football conversation and a life one. That doesn't mean you're blind to all the bad things in life. And stop me, Greg. I'm getting way too philosophical on a football podcast. My goodness, just cut me off. Okay.
And with that in mind, it's been the BWI Live Show for June 25th and also a small segment of T. Frank's life advice. So for Thomas Frank Carr, I'm Greg Pickle. It is decision day for Pierce Petersohn. Don't forget that we will have coverage of it at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com no matter who he picks. And the same goes for all the rest of the recruiting news coming your way throughout the rest of the month of June and into July as well. A week subscription gets you access to all of it for $1 at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, then billed annually from there. So join us there. Thanks for joining us here, and we will talk to you next time on BWI Live.